The video game industry has always been obsessed with chasing the newest trends. So when hip-hop and street culture exploded into the mainstream in the early to mid 2000s, developers went all in. That's when game studios started pushing out some absolutely ambitious and experimental games, each one larger in size and scope than the last. But where did these games go? What were they really about, and will they ever be relevant again, or are we already seeing a resurgence? All that and more as we explore the rise, fall, and potential comeback of street games.
Jump.
What exactly makes a game a street game? Well, it's not really a genre, but more of a theme. Games under this title are typically defined by their setting and cultural influence. For setting, they usually take place in urban environments, often in big cities with various districts and a lot of interconnecting alleyways and neighborhoods. While the in-game time period may range from the past to modern day to even having a retro-futuristic twist, we're mostly looking at games influenced by the 90s, but especially the early to mid 2000s. This time period also bleeds into the cultural references these games draw from. Things like graffiti, skateboarding, underground racing, and club nightlife play a major role, but a hip-hop or some kind of underground soundtrack is an absolute must. Hip-hop specifically as a music genre was slowly but surely gaining mainstream attention throughout the 80s and 90s, but with the rise of the early internet and music artists like Jay-Z, 50 Cent, and Eminem, things changed drastically. By the early 2000s, hip-hop pretty much became synonymous with street culture, and the two of them absolutely exploded in popularity. This was impossible to avoid because it was in everything. Not just music, but fashion, TV, movies, advertising. Basically any industry that could profit off of it did. Now, some game studios were more than comfortable using street culture and its aesthetics to market a game, with some actually going as far as bringing in celebrities and rappers to promote new releases.
Sly and his crew are back and they're bringing down the house with the biggest heist ever. Yo, slow it down. Hey, please, I dig rappers, not raccoons.
But other games went further. For some, street culture was the main appeal. Why? But in some regards, we were lucky. There were definitely more than a handful that captured the energy and style of street culture at the time and somehow translated that into genuinely good games with gameplay and graphics that still hold up. And these games cover a wide variety of genres that expand on multiple aspects of urban living. Like for song and dance, there's B-Boy, a competitive breakdancing game by Freestyle Games. You're meant to perform culturally accurate breakdancing, which itself consists mainly of 4 different forms of movement. Top rock, footwork, power moves, and freezes are all here, and it's required to string these together in the most optimal way to get the best combos and thus win battles. The game's been praised for being super authentic, as the development team apparently worked really closely with Crazy Legs, a legendary b-boy himself who helped pioneer early hip-hop dance and even worked to bring it outside the United States. It included a career mode where you built up your reputation in the underground b-boy scene, eventually competing against real-world breakers as you dance to a mix of classic hip-hop and break beats. Speaking of reputation, that's pretty much a staple gameplay mechanic for a ton of these games. Street cred is a social concept that refers to the respect, authenticity, and reputation a person earns from others, and the concept of street cred mirrors standard gameplay progression systems really well. The idea of starting from nothing, having to prove yourself with small victories, and gradually earning respect is a natural fit for how games structure progression. It feels almost inevitable that these two ideas, street cred and game mechanics, would come together, with the result being a system where you achieve your urban fantasy through money, power, and fame. Entire games are built off of this concept, like The Herbs, where you do the usual Sims bullshit like taking care of basic needs and socializing, but along the way you earn rep. As you progress through the game, you unlock different districts and thus new jobs and gameplay opportunities. You're essentially mapping your social standing within this urban ecosystem, where you climb this sort of societal hierarchy. And sports add another layer to this, with your entire career being this whole other multiplayer multiplicative factor. And so I want to dedicate this next portion to talk about one specific label of street sport games. Games that have resonated with so many people due to their focus on arcadey extreme sports gameplay. And no, I'm not talking about the Tony Hawk games, despite the fact that they fit a lot of the criteria and I do love them. No, these games were amazing because even if you weren't a fan of any of the sports themselves, they did a lot of things right to get your attention and keep you hooked. I'm talking about
EA Sports.
Yeah, this subsidiary of EA Sports was responsible not only for high quality sports games, but for some of the absolute best street games, period. You got a whole lineup of absolute slam dunks like NBA Street, Freakstyle, SSX, and all the rest of those golden goose eggs EA were sitting their fat asses on. But there was one EA Sports big game that I spent too much of my time on. As a kid who grew up playing a lot of cookie cutter wrestling games, I can easily say that this next game beat those out by a motherfucking long shot.
Soldiers are Legion, Method Man, Nori, Capone, Luda, Redman, DMX. You want a shot at me, you gotta make it past these brothers.
Def Jam Vendetta is easily one of the best examples of a street game. The game's a super intuitive ring wrestling game and was a huge collaborative effort between EA and various stars and rappers at Def Jam. The game's got an absolutely stacked roster and fun, over-the-top gameplay that never takes itself too seriously. On top of that, there's a stupid but fun story mode where you pick one of 4 characters and fight your way up through the ranks of an underground fighting scene. You can also pick up certain women along the way and make them fight over you, which is so fucking stupid but absolutely hilarious. The goal is to win back your ex and take down her current boyfriend and reigning boss of the underground, D-Mob, who, by the way, is voiced by none other than Christopher Judge.
I lay down for no man. You wanna take what's mine, you gotta beat me. But nobody ever beats me.
The end result is a massive success that went on to earn, drumroll please, $30 million. How the fuck? So obviously they needed to make a sequel, and Def Jam Fight for New York is honestly one of the few examples of a near perfect sequel. Everything in this game not only builds on what Def Jam Vendetta did, but elevated it in every way possible. The combat is deeper and flashier with a lot more customization for your now original character. The roster is up to an absolutely insane 67 playable characters, even including the breakdancing star himself from earlier in the video, Crazy Legs. The animation and art direction are also still really good looking. It's obvious this game wasn't just a love letter to rap, but to street culture itself. So, what happened? Well, by the 2010s, things had shifted. GTA was basically the only series still thriving with this formula. There were others who tried to compete, some flopped, some were actually pretty good, but most ended up as dormant IPs with no real future. Meanwhile, rap and hip-hop kept growing, but the culture moved online. Platforms like Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and especially SoundCloud became the new proving grounds. The streets weren't where artists proved themselves anymore, but instead it was all about social media presence. And honestly, things haven't really changed. The only difference is maybe TikTok replacing SoundCloud, but that's about it. On top of that, the cost of game development has skyrocketed, and studios are less willing to take risks on street games unless they follow a safe, proven formula. Like, you could argue the Marvel Spider-Man games are technically street. It's set in a city, you're fighting crime on the streets, but it's a little too polished, you know what I mean? So, is that it? Did all street games, save for GTA and a few AAA games here and there, just die off because it was no longer the trend? Not exactly. Urban elements are still around, and you can see their influence on a bunch of different games. Like, the fashion of those times has evolved into modern day streetwear, which you see in a bunch of character designs and skins. This kind of fashion has very much become a fusion of multiple subcultures that have been layered on over time. You'll see a lot of hip-hop and skater influences, yeah, but also Japanese streetwear and punk undertones and just a little bit of high fashion. But going back to how the streets are incorporated into actual gameplay, I'd say the closest we have to this is, surprisingly, the Like a Dragon series. Its protagonists roam the packed streets and alleyways of various Japanese cities, and it's not just a backdrop. The story often revolves around around who controls what territory, and just as San Andreas used its streets to embody West Coast gang culture, Like a Dragon uses its cityscapes to embody the Yakuza underworld and working class struggles of Japan. What makes the series stand out even more, and something that I can really commend it on, is its willingness to acknowledge and interact with the less than ideal aspects of urban living. The series is not afraid of showing the poverty, adult nightlife, and the struggles these groups and other marginalized communities face in modern day Japan. Instead, these elements are tied into the narrative with a sense of humanity. In a way, it mirrors how traditional hip-hop shed light on societal issues. I mean, when was the last time you saw a homeless person or a sex worker or whatever play a key role in the story without being a caricature of one? But I guess it's not fair to say this is an East versus West thing, because I was really disappointed with a game that caught my eye due to its heavy use of street culture, and that game is Hoyo vs. Zenless Zone Zero. The art style, music, character designs, slice of life urban living, and flashy combat system drew me in for a bit, and for a while it kind of worked. I was cautiously optimistic to see what direction a street-influenced gacha game would go, because in theory, a constantly updating city with new characters and subcultures popping up and the interactions between them all could really capture the diversity of urban life. However, since its 2.0 launch, the game has been heavily criticized in those regards by moving away from the urban, retro-futuristic tech noir it originally leaned into. The designs of its characters have unfortunately fallen into the same design tropes you'd see in any other Hoyoverse game, which makes it feel like it's cannibalizing itself to appease its other audiences, rather than new potential long-term fans, myself included, who were originally drawn in by its lower stakes and emphasis on street life. Still, there are plenty of other games out there that continue to put the street back in street gaming. Like a Dragon's developers are still going strong and are still experimenting with the series and its spin-offs. There's also been numerous rumors of a new Def Jam game over the years, so maybe we see something with that, and I can definitely see people looking back on these kinds of games with the same kind of nostalgia we already see for the PS1 era. There's a real chance the indie scene could bring these kinds of titles back since they're more willing to take stylistic risks. I mean, Bomb Rush Cyberfunk, a spiritual successor to Jet Set Radio, turned out to be fucking rad. Hopefully we see more experimental street games in the future, because there's just too much opportunity there for it to go to waste and be forgotten. But until then, stay safe, stay sly, goodbye.